A man was driving along a country road one day when he saw a three-legged chicken pecking over by a large oak tree. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but as he got closer to the tree, the chicken started to scratching and acting like a bull, and as soon as the man passed the tree, the chicken took off after him. The man thought, wow, that chicken can run. So he hit the gas, and when he hit about 35 miles an hour, he looked out the window and saw that the chicken was trotting alongside the car looking up at him. He had to accelerate to almost 50 miles an hour before the chicken peeled off and went down a side road. As soon as he could, the man made a U-turn and went back to where the chicken had turned onto the side road. A few miles later, he came to an old farmhouse with a farmer sitting outside on the porch sharpening a knife. "Excuse me, sir, but I was chased by a three-legged chicken. Have you seen such a creature?" "Well, sonny," said the farmer, "I got about 100 of those birds running around here." The man said, "Wow, how did that happen?" "Well," said the farmer, "me, my wife, and my son, we all love chicken drumsticks. So we figured if we could breed chickens with 3 legs, we would only have to kill one chicken, but we would still all have a leg." "Wow," said the man, "looks like it worked. But how do they taste?" "Beats me," said the farmer. "We ain't never been able to catch one."
We're going to talk about Bubba. Bubba was a guy that liked to brag to everybody, anywhere, anytime, that he knew anybody in the world that there was worth knowing. So one day the boss got tired of hearing this all the time, so he said, "Bubba, today, you're going to prove to me that you know everybody in the world. Do you know Tom Cruise?" "Oh, me and Tom go way back," said Bubba. So the boss bought a couple of airline tickets to Hollywood, and pretty soon Bubba was knocking at Tom Cruise's door. Shortly thereafter, the butler admitted him in. Tom rushed out to greet Bubba, invited him for lunch, and they had a good time discussing movies and things. "Well, I'm impressed," said the boss when they left, "but I bet you don't know the president." "Oh, sure I do," said Bubba. So with that, the boss bought a couple of more tickets, and off they went to Washington. Pretty soon they were at the White House, and the White House guard escorted the two men into the Oval Office. "Hey, you Bubba," said the president, warmly embracing him. After a nice visit and a chat with the cabinet secretaries, they left. The boss was suitably impressed, but he wasn't giving up. "Okay, Bubba, I'm going to ask you if you know the ultimate celebrity, the Pope." "Why, for sure I do," said Bubba. So here they went, on an airplane to Vatican City. They found themselves at St. Peter's Square in a crowd of thousands, and Bubba said, "Heck, I can't see nothing from here." So he went right up to the Swiss guards, and the doors opened for him. The boss waited outside in the square. Pretty soon the door to the upstairs balcony opened, and out comes Pope John Paul II and Bubba. They began to smile and wave at the crowd, with their arms around each other. Shortly thereafter, Bubba decided to return to the square to find the boss. When he got there, an ambulance was loading his boss into the back. Bubba rushed up and said, What happened, boss?" The boss says, "I was doing fine until you came out on the balcony. And then this guy next to me says, 'Who's that guy on the balcony with Bubba?'" 17 years of marriage. A man came home one day and told his wife he'd had enough of her, and he found him a younger, more pretty woman. The wife knew he'd been catting around all these years, so she didn't seem surprised. The house was in his name, and he wanted to remain there with his new love, so he asked the wife to move out. He told her he'd buy her another house as part of his divorce settlement. The wife agreed, but she said only on one condition. She needed 3 days to pack up her things. Well, the husband agreed and said he'd be back in 4 days. So while he was gone, she spent the first day lovingly putting all of her personal belongings into boxes, crates, and suitcases. On the second day, she had the movers come and take everything down to their storage facility. On the third day, she sat down for the last time at their dining table. She had soft music playing in the background, and she had a candlelit dinner, and she feasted on a pound of raw shrimp and a bottle of Chardonnay. When she'd finished, She went into each and every room and took the caps off the curtain rods and deposited a few of the remaining shells into the hollow of each curtain rod. She then cleaned up the kitchen, emptied the trash, and left. Well, the husband came back with his new girl, and all was bliss for the first few days. Then it started, slowly but surely. Stank, stank, stank. If you ever smell rotten seafood, you get the drift. Clueless, the husband couldn't explain why the place suddenly smelled so bad. Him and his girlfriend tried everything. They cleaned and mopped. They aired out the place. They checked the vents for dead rats. Carpets were steam cleaned and air fresheners were placed everywhere. Finally, they called the exterminators in to set rat traps all over the place, and then they removed the carpets, but nothing they tried seemed to work. Finally, they'd had enough. They said, "We gotta move." So they called the moving company. The moving company sent the packers out. They did a very professional job. They packed up everything for the movers to take to their new home, including the curtain rods. Story that happened not long ago at LAX. An atheist boarded a Southwest flight and ends up on the plane sitting next to a teenage girl. Well, after the plane started to taxi, he turned to her and said, "This is my first airplane ride, and I heard if you strike up a conversation with someone, it'll take your mind off of your fear of flying. So would you help me out by talking to me?" Well, the girl had just started to read her Bible, but she put it down and replied to the total stranger, "I suppose so. What would you like to talk about?" Well, the atheist said, "I don't know, but maybe we can talk about why there is no God, no heaven or hell, or no life after death." "Okay," she said. "Those could be interesting topics, but first let me ask you a question." She said, "A horse, a cow, and a deer all eat the same thing, grass. Yet the deer excretes little pellets, while a cow drops out a flat patty, and the horse produces big clumps." She looked at the guy and said, "Why do you suppose they crap so differently when they all eat the same grass?" The atheist was surprised by this girl's intelligence. He thinks about it for a moment, and then he looks at her and says, "I have no idea." Well, the girl looks at him and replies, "So you really think you're qualified to discuss God, heaven and hell, or life after death when you don't know shit?" Well, there was this old guy who always rode his bike to his brother's house every weekend. It took him about 2 hours, so he always left in time enough to be there by 2 p.m. Well, one day he tried to make it in 1 hour, but he just couldn't do it, and he collapsed on a hill from exhaustion. While he was sitting there, a Corvette pulls up and asks him if he needs a ride. The old guy looks at his watch and sees he's going to be late if not, so he said, "How you going to do that, 'cause you already got a passenger?" "No problem," says the man in the Corvette. "I've got a rope in the back, and we'll tie your bike to the back bumper, and you can ride." The man thinks for a minute and says, "Okay." Well, they take off, and the driver of the Corvette yells back, "Just yell beep beep if I'm going too fast." "No problem," the old man thinks. Well, they come to a red light, and a Ferrari pulls up. The man's eyes widen in fright as he sees the Ferrari driver challenge the Corvette driver to a race. Sure enough, the light changes and they're off. They hit 100 miles an hour before they got to third gear. Well, the bottom line was the guy made it to his brother's house early, but the Corvette lost the race. Meanwhile, back at the police station, a cop is telling his sergeant about the race. "Hey, Sarge, the weirdest thing just happened to me. A Corvette and a Ferrari were drag racing down Main Street and lost me doing over 120 miles an hour. "What's so weird about that?" asked the sergeant. The first cop says, "Well, there was this old guy on a bike behind them trying to pass, and he was screaming, 'Beep, beep.'